It is the year 36 BCE, on the banks of the Talas River, thousands of miles west of the Chinese capital, and a Han army is looking at something that should not be there. Behind a double wooden palisade, a line of defenders is holding shields locked edge to edge, overlapping like scales on a fish, in a formation no one in this part of the world has ever used before. The Han soldiers have a name for it in their reports. They do not have an explanation for it. We will come back to that formation. But not yet. This is not a story about a map expanding. This is not a story about a great emperor doing great things from a golden throne. This is not even, really, a story the emperor asked for. This is the story of a man nobody was supposed to remember, and a war nobody in Rome ever knew had been fought on their behalf. This is the story school never taught you. Here's where it starts. Chen Tang was poor. He was smart, ambitious, and completely without the family connections that got other men promoted in the Han bureaucracy. For years he served as a minor frontier officer, watching lesser men rise past him because their fathers had the right friends in the capital. Pay attention to what happens next, because everything about to unfold happens because one overlooked man refused to stay overlooked. Out on the western frontier, the wild edge of Han China, where the empire's power thinned into a patchwork of small kingdoms and trade routes, there was a problem. Decades earlier, the Xiongnu Confederation, the great nomadic rival power to the Han, had split. One Xiongnu, or ruler, named Xiongnu, made peace with the Han court and accepted its protection. His brother, Zhizhi, refused. Zhizhi fled west with his loyal followers, further and further from Han territory, until he reached the region near the Talas River and built himself a new base of power. Here's what most people don't know. Zhizhi didn't just settle down quietly. He started extorting tribute from the small allied kingdoms in the region, kingdoms the Han court considered its own sphere of protection. He killed a Han envoy sent to negotiate. And then he built a fortress and waited, assuming he was too far away for Chang'an to ever reach him. He was almost right. This is where Chen Tang and his superior, a cautious senior officer named Gan Yinshou, come in. Stationed together on the frontier, Chen Tang looked at the maps, looked at the intelligence reports, and reached a conclusion that should have terrified him. Zhizhi's fortress was vulnerable, right now, before it could be finished and fully garrisoned. But launching a campaign that far into Central Asia required imperial approval. And imperial approval, sent by courier across thousands of miles, would take months, time Zhizhi didn't need to finish his walls. So Chen Tang did something almost nobody in Han history had dared to do. He forged an edict in the emperor's name. Stay with me, because this is the moment the entire story turns on. A mid-ranking frontier officer, using the emperor's authority without the emperor's knowledge, ordered the mobilization of Han garrison troops and allied Central Asian kingdoms into a single combined force, more than 40,000 men, by the count later recorded, and marched them west. If he failed, this was not simply a military defeat. Under Han law, forging an imperial edict was a capital crime. If he lost the battle, he would very likely lose his head for the paperwork alone. Gan Yinshou, his commanding officer, discovered what Chen Tang had already set in motion and was horrified, and then, seeing there was no way to stop it without also implicating himself, agreed to lead the campaign alongside him. Two men, one crime, one army, walking toward a fortress at the edge of the known world. They reached the Talas River region in the autumn of 36 BCE. And this is where we come back to that shield wall. Han court records, later compiled by the historian Ban Gu into the Book of Han, describe Zhizhi's defenders forming up behind their wooden palisade in that same overlapping, locked shield formation. Historians still argue about what this actually means. One theory, proposed by scholars in the 20th century and still debated today, points to a specific and startling possibility. 16 years earlier, in 53 BCE, Rome had suffered one of its worst military disasters in history at the Battle of Carrhae, far to the west, in what's now Turkey. Thousands of Roman legionaries were killed, but thousands more were simply never accounted for. Some historians believe a portion of those missing men were taken captive, marched east as prisoners of war, and eventually ended up as mercenaries serving distant regional powers, possibly, just possibly, including the court of a Xiongnu chieftain building a fortress on the Talas River. Is it certain? No. Most historians remain skeptical, and there's no confirmed inscription, no Roman coin, no undisputed proof. But it is a real historical theory, still argued over by serious scholars, and it means that in 36 BCE, at the far edge of Central Asia, it is possible that a Han army and a handful of stranded Roman soldiers briefly stood on the same battlefield, on opposite sides, and neither empire that sent them ever knew. Chen Tang's forces breached the outer defenses. Zhizhi fought from within his own burning compound and was killed. His head was severed, packed for preservation, and carried the entire distance back to the Han capital, a message that took months to arrive but said everything in a single image. Cross the Han, and there is no distance far enough to hide. When Chen Tang's memorial reached the throne describing the victory, it contained a line that Chinese readers still quote today, centuries later, whenever they want to describe uncompromising justice delivered across impossible distance. The idea that anyone who wrongs the empire will be found, no matter how far they run. But here's the part that historians still argue about just as much as the Roman theory. When Chen Tang and Gan Yanshou returned to Chang'an, they weren't greeted as heroes. They were arrested. They had, after all, committed forgery of an imperial edict and launched an unauthorized war, a capital offense regardless of the outcome. For a tense stretch at court, the empire debated whether to execute the two men who had just delivered its most decisive frontier victory in a generation. In the end, the argument that won was simple. The result was too valuable to punish. Chen Tang was pardoned and eventually rewarded with land and title. The empire had built its entire justification for war on results it never authorized, and then rewrote the rules to fit the outcome it wanted. So what do we actually take from all of this? First, a mid-level, overlooked frontier officer forged an imperial order, gambled everything on an unauthorized invasion thousands of miles from the capital, and won. And the empire he served rewrote its own laws around his success rather than punish him for breaking them. Second, this single, obscure campaign is one of the strongest possible pieces of evidence that Han China and the Roman world may have brushed against each other on a real battlefield, not through trade, not through legend, but through soldiers standing across from each other, and neither civilization that sent them ever knew how close they'd come. And third, the one that lingers, somewhere near the modern border of Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, underground that's been farmland and steppe for 2,000 years, the foundations of that fortress may still be down there, waiting, unexcavated, holding whatever answer would finally settle, one way or another, whether the last soldiers who died there were speaking Xiongnu or Latin. Do you think Chen Tang was a hero, or a criminal who simply got lucky? Tell me in the comments. And that is the part of history that school never taught you.